Welcome to Meet at the Table where Warriors are Forged. I'm your host, Don Sherrill. Let's get right into it. I want to begin here tonight with a statement that King David made to his son Solomon. David, as he was dying, said to Solomon, "Show thyself a man." But what does that entail? We have no clear direction today. And that's why I'm doing this channel. I want to help us guys return to biblical masculinity. If we look at the church, we're just getting passive Christianity. As I said last week, there's the feminization of the church. So really, the church is basically saying act like women. And no wonder men are leaving the church in droves. I ran across this statistic in my daily readings. Male conversions to Christianity are at an all-time low, while male conversions to Islam is exploding. And why is this? Islam allows men to be men. Here's the thing, true Christianity does too, but not the weak, wimpy Christianity that has permeated our churches. I said this last week. Men, you do not have to check your testicles at the door when you choose to follow Christ. They were God's design. Do not let the modern day church or today's culture demasculinize you. And speaking of culture, I'm 54 years of age, and I remember as a young boy watching TV shows like Leave It to Beaver and The Andy Griffin Show. Now, both of these programs displayed manly men. Whether it was Ward Cleaver or Andy Griffin, they showed integrity, they showed honesty, they showed love for family, they showed all the qualities of being a man. But then you fast forward to the 90s, and what did we have? We had Married with Children, where the main character was Al Bundy, which basically portrayed being a bum. He was not involved with his kids nor his wife. He was always flirting with other women. He would come home after work, sit on the couch, watch a ball game, drink a beer with his hand in his pants. That is not being a man. Masculinity is not measured by how many beers you can drink or how many women you can bed. That's culture's measurement, but not God's. So again, what does it entail? What is being a biblical man? And I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning of time. God put Adam in the garden and gave him two responsibilities. He said, I want you to provide and protect. To be a man, we're to be a provider and a protector. Now, tonight, I want to focus on just being a protector, and I'm going to stay on that for a couple of weeks. When we protect our home, our family, and those that cannot protect themselves, we are honoring God. And in return, God will honor us. As I thought about that today, I thought about a story in the Bible that I'd like to share with you. There was a time when a woman named Deborah was judging Israel. Now, I look at that and I have to ask the question, where were the men? Because again, I said this last Sunday, God made the man to be the head. And so where were the men? Now, there was one man named Barak who had been tasked by God to fight against Sisera, but he refused to go unless Deborah went with him. This was not being a man. And even though he got victory, God didn't honor him. I want God to honor me. I believe you want God to honor you. So we definitely can't be like Barak, hiding behind a woman's skirt. But we can be like Nehemiah. And I want to share that. I want to share this passage with you here this evening. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 14, and this is Nehemiah speaking, it says, And I looked and rose up and said unto the nobles and to the rulers and to the rest of the people, Be not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your houses. Now, I want to give you two responses first to this. Culture would respond to what Nehemiah said, and they would say, this is toxic masculinity. Or they might say, well, violence is not the answer. Well, actually, sometimes violence is the only answer. There is a phrase, and it's true. How do you stop a bad guy with a gun? Well, a good guy with a gun. We have to be capable of a level of violence that will keep evil in check. And then the church would have responded to what Nehemiah said, and they would, probably pull him to the side and say, now, brother Nehemiah, this is not being Christ-like. We just need to pray about this. You can't go avenging yourself, Nehemiah. We need to love our enemies. But again to that, and I've said this a lot of times. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. God honored Nehemiah. What Nehemiah did was biblical. What Nehemiah asked was biblical. Nehemiah was being a biblical man. He was honoring God, and therefore God honored him. Nehemiah and the nation of Israel, they rebuilt the wall in 52 days. It was a miracle. And in doing this, they were willing to fight. In doing this, they stood against their adversaries. They called them out. I mean, they were bold. They were bold in their faith. And so again, Nehemiah said, fight for your brethren. We today, as men, we are to be protectors. We need to fight for our brethren. We need to fight for those that cannot fight for themselves, that cannot speak up for themselves. And I might do a video on that at a later time, because there is the sexual trafficking of children, there is the abortion issue. Both of these issues, we as men need to be speaking out about the evil that is being done to the most innocent of us. And again, Nehemiah said, fight for your brethren. And then he said, fight for your sons, fight for your daughters, fight for your wives and your houses. That is being a man. We are to fight for our families. We're to fight for our sons and daughters. We are to fight for our wives. We are to fight for our families. We are to fight for those that cannot fight for themselves. You know, men, when our wives and our children are with us, do they feel safe? They ought to feel safe. If we're being the man that God would have us to be, and that is a protector, they ought to feel safe. And so I want to end with that right there tonight. I want to pick up with that next week with, are we capable? Are we capable of being a protector? Do we have what it takes? But again, for the time being, I want to stop right here tonight. Thank you for listening to Meet at the Table, where warriors are forged. If you like the content, please click the like button, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on. Until next week, I'm your host, Don Jurl, signing off.